Shalom. I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process and a special announcement from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem where they will begin training priests to perform the daily sacrifice, also known as the Tamid offering, that was performed in the temple. First, the peace process. In July, the European Commission drafted new guidelines that stated that the European Union will no longer be associated with any economic, social, or academic ventures involving Israeli institutions based in the West Bank, Eastern Jerusalem, or the Golan Heights. The new guidelines stipulate that any agreement made between Israel and the European Union should explicitly state that it does not apply to the territories captured in the 1967 war. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton said that the guidelines are simply putting down on paper what is the current European Union's position on the issue. This policy is scheduled to be implemented on January the 1st, 2014. However, the United States is trying to persuade the Europeans to delay the implementation of their new guidelines in order to not complicate direct peace talks taking place between Israel and the Palestinians. Palestinian negotiator Nabil Sha'ath revealed that the European Union issued these guidelines and they were a part of an agreement that the Palestinians made with the European Union in order to encourage them to restart direct peace talks with Israel. He said that the Europeans encouraged us to enter U.S. brokered talks by publishing their new directives against Israel settlement activities. He added, if Europe doesn't implement what has been decided upon regarding the settlements, it will be impossible for the negotiations to make any progress. Furthermore, Sha'ath revealed that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry guaranteed in writing that Israeli-Palestinian peace talks would be based upon 1967 borders, saying that the Palestinians agreed to restart the direct peace talks as a result of this U.S. guarantee. However, the United States denied the existence of such a document, according to the newspaper The New York Times. PLO Executive Committee member Hanan Ashrawi repeated that the European guidelines were an important part of the Palestinian decision to resume direct peace talks with Israel. She also confirmed that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was pressuring the European Union to revoke, postpone, or water down this decision that was made in July to outlaw all cooperation between the European Union and Israeli organizations who want to do business in the pre-1967 borders. The United States should stop being Israel's lobbyist, Ashrawi said. These European Union guidelines contradict Israeli domestic law. Israel annexed East Jerusalem in 1980 and the Golan Heights in 1981. These annexations have not been recognized by the international community. Palestinian Authority Foreign Minister Riyad Malki said that the United States and President Barack Obama personally may get involved in the Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations in order for the talks to achieve their goal by their stated target date of the spring of 2014. Arab foreign ministers from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, as well as Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad Malki, met with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in France in the past week to discuss progress of the peace talks. Malki, who described the meeting with Kerry as being positive and conducted in a frank atmosphere, said that the next meeting with Kerry will take place in October. At some stage, though, U.S. President Barack Obama will get directly involved with these negotiations, said Malki. Meanwhile, the negotiations department of the Palestinian Authority distributed to members of the Executive Committee an official document in which Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat laid out his reasons for the Palestinians being engaged with direct peace talks with Israel. In the document, Erekat claimed that some countries have promised to recognize the state of Palestine and support Palestinian institutions and the Palestinians joining international treaties if negotiations with Israel fails. In a visit to the United Kingdom, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas urged Britain to recognize the state of Palestine. Addressing members of the British Parliament, Abbas said that 138 states voted last year on November the 29th at the UN General Assembly to upgrade the status of Palestine at the United Nations from being an observer to a non-member state, and thus urged Great Britain to follow suit by recognizing the state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital on the 1967 borders. Next, in domestic Israeli politics, the Jewish Home political party has initiated the Jewish Identity Project. The leader of the political party Yesh Atid, which means there's a future, Yair Lapid, who is also Israel's finance minister, included in the project the reform and conservative branches of Judaism. In doing so, Lapid succeeded in adding a phrase stating that the Jewish Identity Project would include non-Orthodox Jewish movements. Orthodox Judaism believes that the Torah is divine and unchanging, and that proper observance of the mitzvot, or the commandments, must be determined in according with Jewish tradition, meaning the ruling of the rabbis. The Reform movement teaches that the mitzvot, or the commandments, are optional, while the conservative movement teaches that the commandments are obligatory in theory, but has made changes to traditional Jewish observance that the Orthodox view as being invalid, such as allowing conservative Jews to drive cars on the Sabbath and also approving gay marriage. The Reform and conservative branches of Judaism are dominant and popular in the United States and parts of Europe, but they are extremely small in Israel, where Orthodox Judaism has the dominant influence in Israeli religious affairs. In Israel, Orthodox Judaism oversees marriage, burial, and other Jewish life cycle events. Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid has announced that he plans to change the monopoly that Orthodox Judaism has in Israeli society by putting non-Orthodox movements in Israel on equal footing with the Orthodox. Regarding the state of Judaism in the United States, about 2% of Americans are Jewish. In a 1990 U.S. survey of Jews living in the United States, 38% of American Jews regard themselves as being Reform, 35% as being conservative, 6% Orthodox, and 10% consider themselves just Jewish. In a 2012 survey, Reform Jews remained steady at 34%, conservatives dropped to 26%, Orthodox Jews slightly increased to 8%, but those who regard themselves as just Jewish skyrocketed to 25%. But what does just Jewish mean? In actuality, the term applies to those Jews who do not identify with any particular branch of Judaism and do not attend synagogue on a regular basis. In Israel, the Temple Institute, which is an organization dedicated to making preparations to eventually rebuild the Jewish temple, announced on August the 20th that 20 Kohanim, or Jewish men of priestly descent, will begin to be instructed on how to perform the daily sacrifice, also known as the Tamid offering of the temple. The detailed laws of this divine service of the temple has always been available in the volumes of work that describe ancient Jewish tradition. But now, for the first time in 2,000 years, an organized school has been inaugurated to prepare for the renewal of temple services. The grand opening of the school began with a semi-dress rehearsal, or a dry run of the entire daily service from start to finish, reenacting each step. For the purpose of this unique educational endeavor, special educational tools and props were used, representing the necessary vessels. A figure of the Lamb offered up in the daily Tamid service, and a small-scale altar were also created exclusively for study purposes. The event was not open to the public. Some 20 men who are regarded as Kohanim, meaning they directly descend from Aaron, the first high priest, participated in the rehearsal. Some of these men wore actual priestly garments manufactured for them by the Temple Institute. These garments are constantly being prepared, but there were not enough garments for all 20 priests. For those who did not have an actual priestly garment, they wore white shirts and pants in their reenactment of the daily sacrifice. All of the priests were barefoot, as they are forbidden from wearing shoes while doing their sacred tasks within the confines of the Holy Temple. The numerous priestly tasks which make up the daily Tamid offering, as well as the holiday and Shabbat service in the Holy Temple, requires a complete command of every detail of the task at hand to perform them properly. This reenactment by the 20 priestly students was overseen by Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, founder of the Temple Institute, who drilled the priests in their particular instructions for each of the individual actions that make up the daily service. Leading the priests were Rabbi Baruch Kahana, who conducted each of the 4 daily lotteries and distributed the specific assignments to various priests. All of these activities are described in much detail in the Mishnah and other sources of Jewish writings. This is the first time that the daily sacrifice has been practiced since the destruction of the Holy Temple in the year 70 by the Romans. In other news from the Temple Institute, during the week of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, from September the 19th through the 23rd, the Temple Institute, in partnership with the Jewish Leadership Organization, will be conducting half-day tours of the Temple Mount. Jews will only be in those areas of the Temple Mount permitted to them in accordance with Jewish law. Jews are not permitted to be in the sanctified areas of the historical temple. In this tour, Jews will learn where the temple stood and what it will look like, and how is it being planned to be rebuilt in the future. What will this mean for the future of Israel and mankind? These tours will be led by Rabbi Chaim Richman, who is the director of the Temple Institute's International Department and one of the foremost authorities on understanding things associated with the temple. After the visit to the Temple Mount itself, Rabbi Richman will personally guide those of the tour in the newly opened Holy Temple Visitors Center, which is the Temple Institute's new headquarters in the Old City of Jerusalem. The beautiful new center, with its state-of-the-art presentation, provides an opportunity to give people a new level of understanding and experiencing what the Holy Temple was like. Following the recent Israeli elections held earlier this year, there's been a renewed emphasis among those who represent the Jewish Home Political Party, as well as some within Benjamin Netanyahu's own party, the Likud, who is promoting awareness and making it a greater issue that Jews be allowed to be on the Temple Mount and to worship there. Recently, over 100 Jews went up on the Temple Mount. They included Israel's housing minister Uri Ariel, as well as Rabbi Eliezer HaKohen Breuer, Rabbi Pinchas Engel, and Rabbi Chaim Richman of the Temple Institute. Since the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel has permitted Muslim authorities to control the Temple Mount. However, nationalistic and Orthodox Jews desire for there to be a greater Jewish presence on the Temple Mount. On September the 10th, there were 130 yeshiva students from the Jewish settlement Ma'ale Adumim who also went up on the Temple Mount. These students were led by Rabbi Yitzhak Shilat and Rabbi Baruch Brenner. Jews being up on the Temple Mount becomes a great issue of controversy, as the Muslim authorities do not want any Jews to be on the Temple Mount. One of Islam's holy sites, the Dome of the Rock, is located on the Temple Mount. The issue of who controls the Temple Mount and who can have access to the Temple Mount and when is an issue that will ultimately need to be decided in any final status peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.